Have you ever wondered when the fight for women's rights in America truly began? While the struggle for equality has deep roots, there is one event that stands as a monumental starting gun: the Seneca Falls Convention of 1848. In just 10 minutes, we're going to journey back to a small town in upstate New York where a handful of determined women and men lit a fire that would burn for generations. Before 1848, the world for most American women was incredibly confined. Legally, a married woman was practically invisible. She couldn't own property, sign contracts, or keep her own wages. Her legal identity was absorbed by her husbands under a principle called coverture. She had no voice in the laws that governed her life because she couldn't vote. Higher education was largely closed off to her, and professional opportunities were almost non-existent. She was expected to be a wife, a mother, and a manager of the home, subservient to her husband. This was the suffocating reality that a group of reformers decided to challenge head-on. The seeds of the Seneca Falls Convention were sown 8 years earlier, in 1840, at the World Anti-Slavery Convention in London. Two American abolitionists, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott, traveled across the ocean to attend. But upon arrival, they and other female delegates were denied seats and forced to sit behind a curtain, silenced simply because they were women. Imagine their frustration. They were there to fight for the freedom of others, only to be told their own voices didn't matter. It was during this frustrating experience that Stanton and Mott formed a powerful bond and vowed that one day they would hold a convention to advocate for the rights of women. 8 years passed. Stanton had moved to Seneca Falls, New York. She was a busy mother of 3, feeling isolated and intellectually stifled by the constraints of domestic life. In July 1848, Lucretia Mott was visiting her sister nearby. Stanton met with Mott, along with Mott's sister Martha Coffinwright, and 2 other local Quaker activists, Mary Ann McClintock and Jane Hunt. Over tea, Stanton poured out her frustrations, her long accumulating discontent. The other women shared her feelings. The spark that had been lit in London 8 years prior burst into flame. They decided the time for waiting was over. Right then and there, they resolved to hold a women's rights convention, and they planned it for just a few days later. On July 19th and 20th, they placed a small, unpretentious ad in the local newspaper, the Seneca County Courier, announcing a convention to discuss the social, civil, and religious condition and rights of women. They had no idea if anyone would even show up. To prepare, the 5 women gathered at Mary Ann McClintock's house to draft a document that would frame their grievances and goals. They needed a manifesto. Looking for a model, they turned to one of America's most sacred texts, the Declaration of Independence. In a stroke of genius, Stanton took Thomas Jefferson's powerful prose and repurposed it for their cause. "We hold these truths to be self-evident," she wrote, "that all men and women are created equal." This was the opening of their Declaration of Sentiments. The document was a brilliant piece of political writing. Just as the original declaration listed grievances against King George III, the Declaration of Sentiments listed 18 grievances of man toward woman. It detailed a history of repeated injuries and usurpations that had established an absolute tyranny over women. It condemned the denial of the right to vote, the lack of property rights, the unequal divorce laws, the limited access to education and employment, and the different moral codes applied to men and women. It was a comprehensive and damning indictment of the patriarchal society they lived in. On the morning of July 19, 1848, the organizers arrived at the Wesleyan Chapel in Seneca Falls to find a crowd already gathering. They were nervous. They had expected a small local turnout. Instead, around 300 people, mostly women, but also about 40 men had come from miles around, drawn by the radical promise of the small newspaper ad. The first day was intended for women only, but so many men had shown up in support that the organizers decided to let them in, though they were asked to remain silent. Elizabeth Cady Stanton, despite her nerves about public speaking, gave a powerful opening address, stating, We are assembled to protest against a form of government existing without the consent of the governed. We now demand our right to vote. The centerpiece of the two-day convention was the reading and discussion of the Declaration of Sentiments. Stanton read it aloud, and its powerful words resonated through the chapel. The attendees debated the document and the 11 resolutions that accompanied it. These resolutions called for an end to laws that suppressed women, for equal access to education and trades, and for women to be aware of their own degradation. 10 of the 11 resolutions passed unanimously and with great enthusiasm. But there was one resolution that proved deeply controversial, even among these reformers. It was the 9th resolution, the one that Elizabeth Cady Stanton herself had insisted on including, resolved, that it is the duty of the women of this country to secure to themselves their sacred right to the elective franchise, the right to vote, the suffrage. To many in the audience, including some of the organizers like Lucretia Mott, this was a step too far. They feared it was too radical and would make the entire movement look ridiculous, undermining their other, more achievable goals. The debate was intense. It seemed the resolution might fail. It was then that a powerful voice rose in its defense. Frederick Douglass, the famed abolitionist and the only African American in attendance, stood up to speak. He had been invited by Stanton and was the editor of the abolitionist newspaper, the North Star. Douglass argued passionately that he could not accept the right to vote for himself as a black man if that right was denied to women. He argued that political power, the power of the ballot, was essential to achieving any other rights. His eloquent and principled stand swayed the crowd. The resolution on suffrage passed, albeit by a narrow margin. It was a pivotal moment, marking the first time a formal group in the United States had demanded the right to vote for women. At the end of the convention, 100 people, 68 women, and 32 men signed their names to the Declaration of Sentiments. It was an act of immense courage. They were putting their names and reputations on the line for a cause that was widely seen as shocking and unnatural. The backlash was immediate and fierce. Newspapers across the country mocked the convention. The organizers were ridiculed as old maids, disappointed wives, and mannish women. One paper sarcastically wrote that the convention was the most shocking and unnatural incident in the history of womanity. The critics hoped their scorn would scare the women into silence, but they miscalculated badly. As Elizabeth Cady Stanton later recalled, the widespread publicity, even though it was negative, was actually a blessing. It spread the news of their movement far and wide. The ridicule only strengthened their resolve. In her words, it will start women thinking, and men too. And when men and women think about a new question, the first step in progress is taken, and she was right. Seneca Falls was not a one-off event. It was the catalyst. Just 2 weeks later, a larger women's rights convention was held in Rochester, New York. From there, national women's rights conventions were held almost every year leading up to the Civil War. The Declaration of Sentiments became the foundational text of the American women's suffrage movement, a guiding document for activists for the next 7 decades. The road from Seneca Falls to the 19th Amendment, which finally granted women the right to vote in 1920, was long and arduous. It took 72 years of tireless struggle. Many of the original signers of the Declaration, including Stanton and Mott, did not live to see their ultimate goal realized. But their courage in 1848 created a movement. They built the foundation upon which future generations of suffragists would stand. They dared to imagine a world where men and women were truly equal, and by speaking that vision aloud, they began the slow, difficult process of making it a reality. The Seneca Falls Convention is more than just a historical footnote. It's a powerful reminder that significant change often starts small, with a few brave individuals in a small room who refuse to accept the world as it is. It's a testament to the power of words and the courage to demand a more just and equal society. The echoes of the voices in that chapel in 1848 can still be heard today in the ongoing struggles for equality and justice around the world. Thanks for joining us for this 10-minute history. If you're passionate about bringing important stories like this to light, we're looking for volunteers to help with research, editing, and more. Check the description for details on how you can join our team. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next dive into the moments that shaped our world.